This presentation is about worker safety from a different perspective than the generic ag laws and regulations perspective of safety. This one is a generic training type of perspective. And I've given this or a very similar presentation to this to a number of ag companies over the years, trying to give an overview of the importance of safety training. And so this one is exactly the presentation that I gave most recently to a group of ag companies in King City. So safety in the ag industry. So there were lots of people talking about different aspects of safety at this workshop. Food safety and the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, know that one. Worker safety, various tools for potential risk, RSI, repetitive strain injury, and PPE, personal protective equipment, pesticides, heat illness prevention, electrical safety, hazardous waste, and also specialized facilities and equipment, depending on what you're doing. There could be all kinds of unique things or semi-unique things for your type of operation. So it's a long list. And I also used this as a plug. You can tell this is a few years old from my last plug of the Western Food Safety Summit, which we have given every single May for quite some time. Keep your eyes open for this the next time spring rolls around. Check the Hartnell website and see when the next opportunity is to join us at a food safety summit. I don't have dates at the moment for the next one, so I'll just leave it up to you to put in your calendar sometime, maybe in February. You start investigating when is it coming up. Put it in your calendar. So if it's not written down, it never happened. I hope you already know that one. So safety is a combination of multiple things coming together. And as it was presented to me many years ago by somebody I respect very much, John Carnoffel was talking about motivation, management, and maintenance. Motivation, you've got to make safety important. You've got to make employees want to be safe. You've got to make supervisors want their employees to be safe. You have to be motivated and enthusiastic. And so proper training comes from selling the idea of motivation and safety. If people are all on board and they're feeding off of each other's energy, you can do this. If everybody's begrudgingly going, oh, I don't want to do that, it's going to cost too much money, I don't have time for this, you get the naysayers and the moaners and complainers, and motivation goes down the toilet. Management. The management has to be on board. It's not just supervisors and workers. It has to come from the top. Management has to be willing to respond to maintenance issues, safety issues. They got to put their money where their mouth is and make safety a priority. When there is a hazard, it needs to be taken care of. And if you see management dragging their feet about it and safety is only for the people down in the trenches, and good luck dealing with it, because I'm not going to give you any money to fix that problem or put on that safety guard or put up proper signage or whatever, you're not going to have a successful safety program. And maintenance. Your equipment and your facilities, everything needs to be properly maintained. Many safety problems trace back to poor maintenance, equipment failures, things that aren't properly calibrated, aren't properly cleaned and maintained as they should be, become a safety hazard over time. Communication, the single most important element of an employee's job. Almost everything a worker does involves communication in one form or another. So it can be verbal or nonverbal. There's lots of ways to communicate, but employees need to communicate. I don't have time to read all these safety rules. You gotta make the time to communicate. You gotta talk about the rules. You gotta know what they are. You've gotta see where there are problems and report them. It's a working, living program when you're talking about safety. It's got to grow and evolve with more knowledge, more effort, more time, more everything. So communication must be practical, must be simple, must be current and deal with real current issues. I've had safety training programs, and you had to laugh. They were talking about things that hadn't been in that facility for 20 years. You know, one of them was like a diesel operated forklift in this warehouse that was all running electrical forklifts. We don't own a diesel forklift. Why are we talking about these things here? People get bored, they roll their eyes, you're just trying to do too much or say things that don't matter. Like, caution, this sign has sharp edges. You know, you don't need to be telling people stuff like that. It needs to be understandable, interesting, and exciting, and you got to mix it up. People are going to stop listening when it's the same wah, 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 wah. Over every single year, you say the same things and your robotic presentation. People stop listening. Blah, 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 blah. So I'm not going to read the entire list, but you need to make sure you're in a good environment. You're in a place where people can hear you. I've seen safety meetings done right next to a running generator. And people are all talking. There's 3 people in the front that can hear. The other 18 people in the training are all just looking at each other, staring at the sky, or talking to each other and into each other's ears because they can barely hear anything. You can't have distractions. You can't have a bunch of noise. People have to be focused and engaged. Oh, but we have to do the training at the job site. Okay, there are some things you can do, but you don't have to do it near a running generator. You got to make it matter. You've got to make it understandable, and you've got to make it quick. You don't do 2-hour safety training sessions for one topic. Do a bunch of small ones rather than try and do everything at once. Now, in this class, we got 3-hour lectures once a week, kind of a thing. And okay, that's a long time. But being a college student is very different than a group of 15 employees who want to just get to their job and don't want to listen to you. They're not getting a degree out of it. They're just being asked to sign a piece of paper when they're done listening. Got to make it interesting. A lot of communication is nonverbal. How do you do that? How do you use proper eye contact? Where do you look? How long? You don't want to just stare at somebody and tell them, I'm going to teach you all about safety because boy, oh boy, you need to learn. It creeps people out. You know, eye contact is important, but it has to be used properly. Body positioning and body language. There are lots of ways to be a little more interesting in terms of catching people's attention, making them hear what you're saying. Emails, handouts, other things, they're very important. Make sure that you say things in a way that you know they're going to read it. A lot of people don't read a lot of their emails. Oh, more junk, more junk, more junk. What is it in there? What can you do to make sure your safety is mandatory reading if you're using email as part of the way to distribute information. Now, I would be very careful. I'm not a big fan of email for distribution of critical things to larger numbers of people because you get a lot of people who don't read it. Anyway, signage, lots and lots and lots of signage issues that you got to deal with in a workplace. So at the work site, you need to put things that are clearly visible, meaningful, and mix it up. Don't have the same signs. I've been in places where the same signs are so faded, people don't see them anymore. You got to move them, put up a new sign, move it to a new location. Not totally new location, but enough where people go, oh, that's different. And they see the sign, they read it. Think safety first. You love it? Yeah. Isn't that a great way to demonstrate safety in the workplace? You can put up signage in break areas. You can use signs that have the appropriate language, the current information, whatever is necessary to make sure that you are communicating to your employees effectively. Flag and hand signals, is that useful in your operation? Maybe. A lot of time heavy equipment operators need the hand signals or flagging signals in order to properly do their job. Do you use that? Do you have employees that are properly trained to assist heavy equipment operators when appropriate? What about color coding? It can be fantastic to separate different zones for cleaning operations. It can be fantastic because you're not doing cross-contamination. If I'm only using red equipment to clean the red zone, then I can't, if there's a problem in the red zone, I'm not going to cross-contaminate that into the blue zone. Maybe I have shovels. Some shovels are designed for putting product from bin onto the finished packing line. So I'm putting my oregano into the packing line with a shovel. Do I want to use the same shovel that I use as a dustpan to sweep up the crap off the floors? No. How do I avoid that? Color coding. Now, so zones isn't the way to color code that, but color coding can be for different types of jobs. Very often used. Trainings, again, document everything, sign in sheets, sign out sheets to show that they actually agreed that they saw and learned all of the material on the agenda. And you sign the agenda, not just a blank piece of paper. You want to sign the actual agenda so that you're signing something that says, this is what I did and I agree that's what I did. It's not written down. It never happened, right? We know this. So again, the resources devoted to the task, we're not going to get there. Poor decisions may be made at any moment. That is a broken bone or two just waiting to happen, possibly death, who knows. That is really not a good idea. Let's shove our leg into this machine. That's a really good idea. That's a chipper machine. Workplace safety, again, bad idea. Maybe you've seen this one in another presentation. You want your workers to be safe when they go home as well. And you want to know, how do I handle this as a supervisor, business owner, whatever? There's so much to deal with in safety. It is really challenging. So when it comes to worker safety, which is the focus of this presentation, there are a number of things that I'm going to focus on here. Electrical safety, repetitive strain injuries, lifting and back injuries, and personal protective equipment. Signage. This sign definitely drives home that there's a hazard with moving parts. So signage is crucial. Hard hat area, high voltage, eye protection required, whatever it is, you need to be sure your employees are reminded by signage in the appropriate areas in a way that's going to catch their attention and they're going to notice. So the first major category, repetitive strain injuries, RSI, also known as cumulative trauma disorder, CTD, musculoskeletal disorder, MSD. Don't worry about the CTD and MSD acronyms to memorize those. I forget them myself. These are things that I would argue were made up by attorneys because the RSI became a little blasé in the courtroom. People heard it too much, started to go, yeah, another one of those soft tissue injuries. And they needed something new and exciting. So different ways of saying the same thing help attorneys when it's time to go to court. So what happens? Carpal tunnel syndrome. There's the carpal tunnel in the wrist. You do computer work with your wrists bent slightly backward, and you can put constant minor pressure on the nerves going through that carpal tunnel and do serious long-term permanent nerve damage. So you want to have your hands in the correct relaxed position, relatively straight or maybe slightly bending down, not bent back when you're working on a computer or other data entry device. Low back injuries, tendonitis, that can happen anywhere, tennis elbow and knees, and tendons are in every joint in your body. Soft tissue injuries cost workers' compensation tons and tons and tons of money. Who pays the workers' compensation money? You as the company owner. You're the one who has to foot the bill by paying the premiums. The more claims you have in your company, the more your rates go up for workers' compensation. So you want to stop those repetitive strain injuries. One of the ways to do that is by having good ergonomic workspace or workstation design. Another way, teach proper lifting. You do not bend over at the waist and grab and lift with your back. You bend at the knees and you lift with your legs. There's also certain back supports that are available, very inexpensive, but important to have for many people. One of the worst things you can do when lifting, and I can't demonstrate it here, but you never want to turn while holding weight. You never want to turn at the waist. You turn with the feet. So you lift something like the center picture with the legs. Once you're in a standing position, you turn with your feet. And so designing workstations where you're unloading one area and offloading to another, what people often do is they'll pull from one area and with the weight in their hands, they'll kind of lean and twist at the waist and go set it down. You're asking for a problem. That is the absolute worst scenario for lifting. Always turn with your feet, never at the waist. And you can think it through a little bit. How can I get this load in a position and where I'm offloading it so I don't have to turn? And if I can't, turn with your feet. Eye protection. I've got some stories about eye protection, but essentially it has to be functional. Something that you can see clearly through, something that is properly rated to protect your eyes. If you're dealing with chemicals, the personal protective equipment necessary for your eyes might need to be fully shielded. But is it ballistic? If you're doing a grinder in a workshop, you're working in the shop that repairs and fixes tractors and farm equipment. Well, your eye protection might include shielding for welding, or it might include ballistic eye protection, where it's some sort of bulletproof material or bullet resistant material. Nobody's going to shoot a 45 into your eyeball, but it might almost be that bad when you're talking about a grinding wheel exploding in your face. It's one thing to have some surgery to fix a piece of grinding wheel that went into your cheek. It's a whole nother thing to have it go through your eye. So you need these projectile or ballistic rated material if you are using certain kinds of equipment. And I've got a story about Desert Storm back in the day in the Middle East when we had our military presence there under the code name or under the, I don't know, the marketing name of Desert Storm. And all kinds of eye problems were coming up, and people assumed, well, they're using a lot of helicopters and there's a lot of sand and they're blowing all of this sand around and people are getting stuff in their eyes, and that must be the reason. But when they really looked into it, the main reason is because people were taking their eye protection off because it was uncomfortable and looked like something that their grandfather retired in Florida should be wearing. They were big, bulky, and ugly. And most of these military personnel were young, impressionable. They wanted to look okay. They wanted to look cool. They wanted something that worked effectively, that wasn't big, bulky, and awful. So they would take them off. And then they had all these eye injuries. So when you're supplying eyewear, it's not just, wow, I can get these for $1.99 a pair. I'm going to get a whole bunch of those for my crew. They have to work. They have to have UV protection if they're in the field. They have to have clear lenses. They can't fog up like crazy. And they have to look decent, or people might not wear them. And if they're not wearing them, they're not protecting them. And things like this can happen. That is the wire wheel. Talked about the grinder exploding. What happens when the wire wheel has a problem? Enough on that one. Now, if I grossed you all out, there's nothing to worry about on this slide. More personal protective equipment. Bump caps. You can use color coding for the bump caps so you know who's working in what area, who's the supervisor, who's the safety manager, whatever. You can use whatever coding you want. But most industrial sectors have standards for color coding the bump caps. Gloves, you have to have the right material. Do I need rubber? Do I need nitrile? Do I need latex? Do I need what? What's the appropriate material for what the hazard is? And it has to be the appropriate thickness. It also has to be the appropriate length on the sleeve. And it has to have no inside lining. None of that fuzzy crap to make your fingers feel nice and cozy inside the gloves, because any kind of lining can attract chemicals to absorb up through your sweat and wick things up the glove. Not good. Boots, you have to have the appropriate boots. Now, these are work boots, not chemical resistant rubber boots, but what is the sole? What is the level of absorbency in your boots? Are they appropriate for the PPE you need for your job? Every job is different. Loose clothing, jewelry, long hair, all of that, very dangerous. Anything hanging down, even the strings on your hoodie, do not wear any of those near moving equipment. Here's something you might not even pay attention to. You've got a nice little sweater. It's keeping you warm in that cold quality control room, but you end up getting some chemical on your clothing. Is it a dangerous chemical? I don't know. If it is, now it's on your clothing. If it's not a dangerous chemical, then you may be contaminated an experiment, or you messed with the very precise measurements. You need exactly 265 milligrams of this chemical for the chemical reaction you're about to perform. And because your sweater picked up a little bit, you only have 258. Does that mess with your data? It might. There are a lot of very precise tests in a lab, and the kind of loose clothing can be an issue in a lot of ways. This is the worst. Your loose clothing getting you sucked into some sort of moving equipment, which happens. Rings. Now, some husbands say, oh, I can't wear my wedding ring at work because it's a safety hazard. And some of the times, it's true. It's really dangerous for some things. Steel-toed shoes to protect your toes. In some environments, it's actually more dangerous to have steel-toed boots than to have just a hard, thick leather work toe. You got to think about that. Hoodie strings, very dangerous. It'll happen so fast, something gets pulled in, you're leaning over, and that hoodie string gets grabbed by a spinning belt or something, pulls you down. It'll slam your head down so fast, you don't even know what happened. And it's over. Boom, it's over. Either you have a serious injury or you're dead. Dust masks are not PPE. Dust masks are never PPE in agriculture. I was actually fined one time because one of my employees was, actually I wasn't fined. I was warned one time and told I would be fined if this employee ever had dust masks in their locker again, because they went and looked at the employees' lockers on our work site. And one of the employees had allergies and he kept his dust masks there. It's like OSHA said he can wear the dust mask when he's doing certain jobs, but you can't have them in the locker because this area includes dressing for pesticide use. And you can't have that, even the appearance that it might be used for pesticide safety. No. His dust masks, he had to keep them in his car or in a shelf in the break room or something. That is proper agricultural protection for a lot of agricultural chemicals. Now, this does not include a face shield. Maybe some chemicals do include a requirement for a built-in face shield. This is just a respirator. There are lots of designs of respirators. Some of them have electrical battery powered, positive pressure, fancy, all kinds of fancy things to be very, very, very safe. Others can be high end, but simple, like the one you see on the screen here. They must be matched to the application and they must be matched to the chemical being used. So here is a picture of somebody in full personal protective equipment gear with their respirator, their safety glasses or face shield in this case, chemical resistant Tyvek usually coveralls, gloves, and boots. Not something like this where the person is not wearing the appropriate gear at all. No eye protection, a dust mask instead of a respirator, no gloves, no chemical resistant clothing. This is a disaster. Cal OSHA Heat Illness Prevention Standard came around in 2009 and has been revised since. I think the most substantial revisions were around 2015, and that's where most of the kinks were worked out. There probably have been some minor tweaks since then. Not aware of anything substantive in recent years. You need to provide shade. I don't know if that would be Cal OSHA approved shade, but it's one of the more creative shade structures that I've ever seen. So like I mentioned, March of 2009 is when it was originally implemented. Because of all of the heat illness issues, you must provide adequate drinking water, 1 quart of water per hour per worker, with shade available for 25% of the crew at any given time. And that shade must be within 5 minutes of the work site. Additional rules are imposed when the temperature gets above 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Specific supervision breaks and buddy system types of rules are triggered when the temperature gets that hot. In 2011, there was an audit of the 2009 rules, and more than 50% of ag companies failed to comply with the rules. Quite the embarrassing disaster. And so in response to that, the following year, OSHA launched a massive heat illness prevention campaign and opened an office in Bakersfield, trying to assist with the education and information spread for that process. Take a quick break.